Germany entered the First World War not as a broken nation, but as one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen. At the dawn of the 20th century, the German Empire stood as a symbol of industrial strength, military discipline, and national pride, unified only in 1871. Under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck and Prussian dominance, Germany had rapidly transformed into a continental superpower. Its steel factories roared day and night. Its railways stretched across Europe like iron veins. Its scientists, engineers, and military planners were admired and feared in equal measure. To many observers, Germany represented the future. Its army was among the most disciplined and technologically advanced in the world. Its economy rivaled that of United Kingdom. Its ambitions reached far beyond Europe. Yet within just 4 years, this mighty empire would collapse into military defeat. Political revolution, economic exhaustion, and imperial ruin. How did one of the strongest nations on earth fall so completely? This is the story of Germany's collapse in World War I, a story not only of battles and bloodshed, but of pride, miscalculation, and the fatal consequences of overreach. When war erupted in the summer of 1914, Germany believed victory would come swiftly. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo triggered a chain reaction of alliances. Germany stood firmly behind Austria-Hungary, while Russia mobilized in support of Serbia. Soon, Europe was engulfed in a conflict unlike anything it had seen before. German military strategy centered on the famous Schlieffen Plan. The plan was bold, ambitious, and incredibly risky. Germany feared fighting a war on two fronts, against France in the west and Russia in the east. To avoid this nightmare, German planners intended to defeat France quickly before Russia could fully mobilize. The German army would sweep through neutral Belgium, encircle Paris, and force French surrender within weeks. Then Germany would turn eastward to face Russia. On paper, it seemed brilliant. In reality, it marked the beginning of Germany's downfall. The invasion of Belgium brought immediate consequences. Belgium's resistance was stronger than expected, slowing German advances. More importantly, the violation of Belgian neutrality brought Britain into the war. Now Germany faced not just France and Russia, but also the immense naval and industrial power of the British Empire. What was meant to be a quick war became a prolonged struggle. The early months of 1914 seemed promising for Germany. Its armies advanced rapidly into France. Town after town fell. Panic spread across Paris. German commanders believed victory was near. Then came the First Battle of the Marne. In September 1914, French and British forces launched a desperate counterattack along the Marne River. German lines, stretched and exhausted, began to falter. Communication failures and logistical strain weakened the advance. The offensive collapsed. This was the moment Germany's dream of quick victory died. Instead of a decisive win, the Western Front hardened into a vast network of trenches stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. The war had become one of attrition. For Germany, this was disastrous. Its entire war plan depended on speed. Now it was trapped in a prolonged industrial war against enemies with greater global resources. Trench warfare transformed the battlefield into a machine of death. Months turned into years. Men lived in mud, rats, disease, and constant shell fire. Entire generations were consumed in narrow strips of devastated land. Germany's military leadership believed breakthroughs could still be achieved through force. This belief led to some of the most devastating battles in human history. In 1916 came Verdun. The German High Command, led by Erich von Falkenhayn, launched a massive offensive against the French fortress city of Verdun. The strategy was chillingly simple: bleed France white. The goal was not merely territorial gain. It was to inflict such catastrophic losses that France would collapse. For months, artillery thundered without pause. Millions of shells rained upon Verdun. The landscape was shattered into a wasteland of craters, shattered trees, and corpses. Germany inflicted enormous damage, but the French refused to break. Instead, both sides suffered unimaginable casualties. Verdun became a symbol of the futility of attrition warfare. Germany had committed vast resources and manpower, yet achieved no decisive result. Soon after came the Battle of the Somme. Though launched primarily by British and French forces, it forced Germany into another brutal defensive struggle. The Somme introduced new horrors, including the first use of tanks by the British. Again, casualties were staggering. Hundreds of thousands died. Germany's army remained formidable, but every battle drained its strength. Unlike Britain and France, Germany faced increasing difficulty replacing men and material. This was where economics began to decide the war. Britain's naval blockade slowly strangled Germany. The Royal Navy cut off access to vital imports, including food, raw materials, and industrial supplies. At first, Germany attempted to manage the shortages, but as the war dragged on, the effects became severe. Food scarcity spread across the country. Bread was rationed. Meat became scarce. Fuel shortages disrupted factories and civilian life. The harsh winter of 1916 to 1917 became known as the Turnip Winter. Ordinary Germans, unable to obtain potatoes and basic staples, were forced to survive on animal feed and turnips. Malnutrition spread rapidly. Morale began to crumble not only at the front but at home. This was the beginning of internal collapse. Germany's leaders had underestimated the economic endurance required for modern total war. Industrial might alone was not enough. A nation also needed sustainable access to food, trade, and global supply routes. Germany had none of these advantages once Britain's blockade tightened. Meanwhile, the war on the Eastern Front offered temporary relief. In 1917, Russia was thrown into revolution. The scoot of the Tsarist regime and the rise of the Bolsheviks dramatically altered the strategic balance. For Germany, this seemed like an opportunity. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918 removed Russia from the war, freeing German troops from the east. At first glance, this appeared to be Germany's chance to win. Thousands of experienced soldiers were transferred to the Western Front. German commanders now prepared for one final decisive offensive. This became known as the Spring Offensive of 1918. Led by Erich Ludendorff, Germany launched massive assaults against Allied lines in France. By mid-1918, the tide had turned decisively. The Allied 100 Days Offensive began. British, French, and increasingly American forces launched coordinated attacks across the Western Front. Germany's exhausted army, battered by years of warfare and failed offensives, began to retreat. Discipline weakened. Desertions increased. The aura of invincibility vanished. At home, the situation was even worse. The German people were starving. Workers launched strikes. Factories slowed. Public confidence in the government collapsed. The monarchy under Kaiser Wilhelm II had become increasingly disconnected from reality. Military leaders had dominated decision-making, often sidelining civilian political voices. This imbalance proved fatal. Germany had become a state governed by military necessity rather than political flexibility. By late 1918, revolution spread across the empire. Sailors at Kiel mutinied rather than continue a hopeless war. Their rebellion quickly inspired wider uprisings. Workers' councils formed. Cities erupted in unrest. The imperial structure that had seemed so strong only 4 years earlier began to disintegrate from within. This was not merely military defeat. It was systemic collapse. The army was retreating. The economy was failing. The people had lost faith. The political system was imploding. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. The German Empire was finished. Just 2 days later, on November 11th, Germany signed the armistice. The guns finally fell silent. But the consequences of Germany's defeat would echo far beyond 1918. To understand why empires collapse, one must look beyond the battlefield. Germany did not lose solely because of Allied military superiority. It lost because multiple failures converged at once. Strategic overconfidence, economic vulnerability, political rigidity, leadership miscalculations, social exhaustion. Each on its own might have been survivable. Together, they proved catastrophic. The first great lesson is the danger of pride. Germany entered the war believing in rapid victory. Its military culture emphasized offensive action, discipline, and decisive campaigns. Yet this confidence became overconfidence. Leaders failed to prepare for prolonged war. They underestimated the resilience of their enemies. They overestimated their own ability to sustain attrition. This pattern has repeated throughout history. Power often breeds assumptions of invulnerability. Empires begin to believe their own myths. Germany's fall is a stark reminder that confidence without strategic realism can be fatal. The second lesson is the central role of economics. Wars are not won by armies alone. They are won by supply chains, industry, food systems, and financial endurance. Britain's blockade was as destructive as any artillery barrage. By slowly strangling Germany's access to resources, it weakened the empire from within. Starving civilians cannot sustain national morale indefinitely. Economic collapse undermines military strength. This remains true for nations today. A powerful military means little if the domestic economy cannot support prolonged conflict. The third lesson concerns political leadership. Germany's wartime governance became increasingly dominated by military commanders. Civilian oversight weakened. Strategic decisions were often made with short-term military logic rather than long-term national interest. The submarine campaign is a prime example. It made tactical sense in the short term. Strategically, it invited disaster by provoking the United States. When military priorities overwhelm diplomatic and political judgment, nations risk self-destruction. The fourth lesson is the importance of public legitimacy. No empire can survive once its own people cease to believe in it. By 1918, Germany's population had endured years of hardship. Food shortages, mass casualties, censorship, and unfulfilled promises eroded trust. When the sailors mutinied and workers revolted, the imperial system collapsed with astonishing speed. Institutions that appear strong from the outside may already be hollow within. This is perhaps the most enduring warning. Collapse often begins invisibly. It starts with overreach, then comes strain, then denial, then sudden unraveling. Germany's fall in World War I stands as one of history's clearest examples of how superpowers stumble, not through one single defeat, not through one battle alone, but through the cumulative weight of misjudgment. From the Marne to Verdun, from the blockade to the spring offensive, from the palace to the factory floor, every decision, every miscalculation, every loss contributed to the final collapse. The empire that once seemed destined for dominance disappeared in just 4 years. Its defeat reshaped Europe. Its collapse ended monarchies across the continent. Its political vacuum gave birth to instability that would later contribute to an even more devastating war. And so the story of Germany in World War I is more than military history. It is a study of power itself, how it rises, how it overextends, how it falls. Empires rarely collapse in a single moment. They collapse through accumulated failures masked by pride. Germany's story remains one of the most powerful historical warnings for nations in every age. Strength without foresight leads to vulnerability. Ambition without restraint leads to ruin. And when leadership ignores the limits of power, even the mightiest empire can fall. From pride to defeat, this is how a superpower stumbled. Absolutely, and here is part 2 of your continuous professional historical voiceover script in the same cinematic documentary style. Yet Germany's collapse in 1918 was not simply the result of losing ground on the battlefield. The true collapse had begun much earlier, deep beneath the surface of military reports and official speeches. For years, the German leadership had continued to present the war as winnable. Newspapers were carefully controlled. Military losses were often softened for public consumption. Hope was preserved through patriotic slogans, promises of final victory, and repeated assurances that one decisive blow would end the war. But reality was far harsher. By 1917 and especially into 1918, Germany had become a nation under extreme strain. The British naval blockade, which had been tightening since the earliest months of the war, was now crushing the empire's ability to function. Imports of food, fertilizer, fuel, and industrial materials had fallen drastically, and historians widely regard the blockade as one of the decisive factors in Germany's defeat. Wikipedia. Factories that once powered the empire's war machine began to struggle. Steel production slowed. Rail transport was increasingly unreliable. Coal shortages reduced industrial output. Civilian life became a daily battle for survival. In the cities, long lines formed outside bakeries and ration centers. Families waited for hours in the cold, hoping for bread, potatoes, or a small portion of meat. Children suffered from malnutrition. Disease spread more rapidly among weakened populations. For many Germans, the war was no longer a distant struggle at the front. It had entered their kitchens, their homes, and their bodies. The social contract between the state and the people was beginning to break. Germany's rulers had asked for sacrifice. Now the people were asking what that sacrifice had achieved. Millions of men had been sent to the front. Hundreds of thousands had not returned. Entire communities were marked by absence. Villages lost sons. Cities lost workers. Families lost fathers and brothers. The emotional burden of the war was immense. But perhaps even more dangerous was the growing realization that victory might never come. This psychological shift was devastating. Nations at war can endure extraordinary suffering when they believe there is purpose and a path to victory. Once that belief disappears, collapse accelerates. This is exactly what happened inside Germany. At the front, German soldiers were exhausted beyond measure. By 1918, many of the empire's best trained and most experienced troops had already been lost in earlier battles such as Verdun, the Somme, and Passchendaele. The replacements were often younger, less experienced, and physically weaker. Some had barely completed training before being sent into combat. The elite image of the German army still existed in public imagination, but the reality in the trenches was far different. Morale was deteriorating. Letters from soldiers increasingly spoke of hopelessness, fatigue, and doubt. Many no longer believed the war could be won. The failure of the Spring Offensive in 1918 proved to be the final military turning point. This offensive, Germany's last great gamble, had been designed to split the Allied lines before American forces could fully arrive in Europe. At first, it seemed terrifyingly successful. German stormtroopers broke through parts of the Western Front with remarkable speed. The Allies were shocked. For a brief moment, Germany appeared to have regained the initiative. But success on the map did not translate into strategic victory. The offensive advanced faster than logistics could support. Supply lines failed to keep pace. Artillery lagged behind. Food, ammunition, and medical support became increasingly scarce. The further German forces advanced, the more vulnerable they became. The offensive consumed Germany's last major reserve of manpower. When it stalled, the empire had little left to replace those losses. Encyclopedia Britannica. This was the fatal wound. After the offensive failed, the Allies launched the 100 Days Offensive. Now the balance of power had decisively shifted. Fresh American troops were arriving in growing numbers. By late 1918, U.S. divisions in France had risen dramatically, reinforcing Allied confidence and strength. Encyclopedia Britannica. For Germany, this was the nightmare scenario. The war had become a contest of endurance, and the Allies now possessed overwhelming industrial and manpower superiority. The German army was retreating across multiple sectors. Defensive positions that had once seemed nearly impregnable were falling. Each retreat damaged morale further. Each lost town reinforced the sense that defeat was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. Meanwhile, Germany's allies were collapsing around it. This is a critical but often overlooked part of the empire's fall. By autumn 1918, the Central Powers were disintegrating. Bulgaria signed an armistice in September. The Ottoman Empire followed. Austria-Hungary, already weakened by internal ethnic tensions and battlefield defeats, was rapidly falling apart. As Germany's allies surrendered one by one, the empire found itself increasingly isolated. Wikipedia. This isolation had enormous military consequences. Germany could no longer rely on support from its partners. It now faced the full weight of Allied power alone. At the same time, the internal political situation was becoming explosive. The German Empire had long depended on a delicate balance between monarchy, military authority, and industrial elites. World War I shattered that balance. As hardship intensified, public anger turned toward the government. Questions emerged. Why had the war lasted so long? Why had promises of victory failed? Why were civilians starving while leaders continued to speak of honor and perseverance? These questions became political weapons. By 1918, strikes and demonstrations were spreading. Workers in major industrial centers demanded peace, food, and reform. The legitimacy of imperial rule was collapsing. Even within the military leadership, confidence was faltering. Generals such as Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff had dominated wartime decision-making, often overshadowing civilian leadership. But by late 1918, even they recognized that the military situation was hopeless. Germany's own high command informed the Kaiser that defeat was inevitable. Wikipedia. This admission was devastating. For years, the military had projected strength. Now it was acknowledging collapse. The psychological shock rippled through political circles and the general population. The empire was unraveling at every level. Then came the Kiel Mutiny. In late October 1918, German naval commanders planned one final major engagement against the British fleet. To many sailors, this plan seemed senseless. The war was already lost. Why sacrifice thousands more lives in a symbolic final battle? The sailors refused. Mutiny broke out. What began as military insubordination quickly transformed into a broader revolutionary movement. Workers' and soldiers' councils formed across cities. Demands for political change spread rapidly. The authority of the monarchy evaporated almost overnight. This was the moment when military defeat fused with political revolution. Germany was no longer simply losing a war. It was losing the state itself. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated. The German monarchy, once one of Europe's great imperial institutions, came to an end. Within days, the armistice was signed. The fighting stopped at 11:00 a.m. on November 11, 1918. Encyclopedia Britannica. For Germany, however, the silence of the guns did not bring peace. It brought reckoning. The empire that had entered the war with confidence, discipline, and ambition now faced humiliation, instability, and uncertainty. The fall of Germany in World War I offers one of history's clearest lessons on why empires collapse. Military strength alone is never enough. An empire must sustain its economy, It must preserve political legitimacy. It must maintain public morale. It must adapt its strategy to changing realities. Germany failed in each of these areas. Its military planning was built on assumptions that did not survive first contact with reality. Its economy was vulnerable to blockade. Its leadership often prioritized pride over flexibility. Its political structure proved too rigid for crisis. Its people were asked to endure more than any society could reasonably sustain. This is how great powers fall, not always in a single catastrophic moment. Often collapse is gradual. It begins with overconfidence, then comes strategic miscalculation, then resource depletion, then internal distrust, then institutional breakdown. And finally, what once seemed permanent disappears with astonishing speed. Germany's experience in World War I demonstrates this with absolute clarity. It was not inevitable. It was the result of choices, pressures, and failures that accumulated over time. And in that accumulation lies the true lesson of history. That collapse is rarely sudden. It is built step by step, until the final moment simply reveals what has already happened.